Hello guys, welcome to a brand new video, and today I am going to cover my prediction for the 2024 presidential election. So much has changed since the last time I have done this, but the most notable thing is the debates that happened, and oh my god, Joe Biden did horrible. So bad, in fact, that his party is considering replacing him. Do I think he's going to be replaced? Maybe, but probably not. And I will make a prediction on if Kamala Harris replaces him and how she would do against Donald Trump. However, this time we are just going to cover Joe Biden and Kamala Harris against Donald Trump and Doug Burgum. I chose Doug Burgum for Trump's VP because, well, it seems like he's the most obvious. If you type, I think it's trumpburgum.com, it'll send you to the Trump website. Yeah, I think he's going to be his VP. But yeah, I think we should get to it. If you look at the national polls, Joe Biden is actually behind. He's only at about 40%, while Donald Trump is at 42.2%. I'm not going to lie, I don't think the polls are that accurate, so I'm not going to be using them as that much of a metric for this video. But even if you go to the betting markets, you can see Donald Trump has a 63% chance at winning the presidency. So it seems overall Donald Trump is favored. Well, what's my prediction? Well, let's start. So first I'm going to mark the states that I think will be safe for Joe Biden, so over 15% for him. Those are California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, Massachusetts, his home state of Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, and New York. And one more new addition from 2020, Colorado. It voted blue by over 15 in the governor and Senate races in 2022, and I think the same thing will happen here. Now for the safe Republican states, I think Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska at large, Nebraska's third, Nebraska's first, Oklahoma, probably Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Indiana will all go to Trump by more than 15. Now I'm going to cover Joe Biden's likely states, so the states between 15% and 5%. The most interesting one here is actually New Jersey. You would expect this to be a safe Democratic state. And a lot of polls have come out recently showing that it's actually going to be really close, or that Trump might even be in the lead. And while I completely disagree with that, I do think there's some merit, and I think it will be slightly below 15%, maybe 14 or 13. So I have that as likely. Next, I have New Mexico. This is in a very similar position to New Jersey, where it's kind of being overhyped as this possible sleeper flip. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think it will be at around 10%, maybe 8%, so around where it was in 2020. Next, there is Virginia. Now, Virginia used to be considered a swing state. However, by now, it is basically a solid Democratic state. And I can't see Trump bringing it under 5%. I think it will be maybe 8%. It voted for Biden by about 10% in 2020. And yeah, I think it will be a likely state. Next, I have Nebraska second. It may seem like not that important as it's only one electoral vote. However, one electoral vote can decide this election. It is extremely close. Nebraska second is largely centered around Omaha, Nebraska, which is not very Democratic normally. However, it shifted to the left very fast as it does not like Trump and has and actually really likes Joe Biden. The same can be said for New Hampshire. Hillary Clinton only won it by 2,000 votes in 2016. However, since then, Joe Biden won it by 7% in 2020. And I think the same thing will happen here. Joe Biden maybe wins it by 6, so a bit less than 2020, but around a similar margin. And finally, Maine. I think Maine at large will go to Biden by a slightly smaller vote than in 2020. I think it will be around 6 to 5%, maybe slightly below 5, but I think that is it. Republicans have no chance at flipping any of these. Now for the Republican likely states, so states between 15 and 5%. There are a few. There is Iowa and Ohio. I will talk about these at the same time. They, much like Virginia, were swing states in like 2008. However, they have largely shifted to the right recently, voting for Trump by 8% in both 2016 and 2020. I think this time Ohio is going to vote for Trump by around 10%, maybe 9%, and Iowa is going to vote for Trump by 11% to 12%. Democrats should not even try. The only race in either of these states that they should actually try for is the Senate race in Ohio, which could decide the Senate, and you can find out my prediction for that tomorrow, as I'm going to be posting my video on that. Next, South Carolina. I think it will be right below 15%. It voted for Trump by 11% in 2020. However, due to the nation overall, I believe, shifting to the right, I think it will be a slightly higher margin for Donald Trump. However, the state is slowly shifting to the left. Florida, a state that voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump by 1% in 2016. And then while the entire rest of the nation shifted to the left in 2020, it was one of the only states that shifted to the right. And then it doubled down in 2022, voting for Governor Ron DeSantis by 19% and Senator Marco Rubio by around 15%. I do not think this state will be as far to the right as it was in 2022, largely because this is a presidential election year, so a lot more Democrats are going to turn out. And the 19% margin that voted for Ron DeSantis can be largely because it is a governor election. Voters are a lot less partisan in governor elections. There's still a lot of Democrats in Florida. However, it is definitely shifting to the right. So I think it will be for Donald Trump by around 5 to 7%. Next, I have Alaska. This is a state that is shifting to the left extremely fast. It voted for Donald Trump by barely more than 10% in 2020. However, if you look at the election before that, it voted for Trump by 14%. The election before that, similar, 14%. This state is shifting to the left. And that has been exemplified by it having a Democratic representative in the House, Mary Peltola. So they have voted for Democrats statewide. And I think it will be a swing state in future elections. However, this election simply just is not it yet. It's not its time. I think it will vote for Donald Trump by slightly less than 10%. And the final likely state is Texas. Now, Texas is an interesting case. It is an extremely important state, having the second most electoral votes in the entire country. And its shift to the left has been extremely interesting. It voted for Mitt Romney by 15% in 2012, and then it voted for Donald Trump by only 9% in 2016, and finally it voted for Donald Trump by 5.6% in 2020. A lot of Democrats in the Rust Belt and in California are moving to Texas. That is shifting it to the left. The Democrats have a lot to gain in these cities and in a lot of suburbs where Joe Biden does particularly well. However, this is a right-shifting year. In a neutral year, then, yeah, I could see Texas being under 5%. In fact, I could see it being like 3%. However, I think this year is just going to favor Republicans, and I think it will go to Donald Trump by around a similar margin of 2020. In a way, I think it's shifting to the left, and this election season being more for Republicans will kind of cancel each other out, and it will vote the same way as it did in 2020. I do think it will be a swing state in the future, possibly as soon as 2028. However, right now, I just do not think it is at its time yet. And the final likely state for Republicans, or it's not even a state really, it's a district, is Maine's 2nd. It's kind of similar to Nebraska's 2nd, but the opposite. It really likes Trump. It went to Obama in 2012 and 2008. However, it has shifted to the right considerably during both of his presidential elections, and I think that trend will continue. I think it will vote for him by around 9 to 12%. And now, finally, we can move on to states that I think will be won by Joe Biden by less than 5%. Currently, Joe Biden has 216 electoral votes. Donald Trump has 219. There are 103 up at stake. I think Minnesota will go to Joe Biden by barely less than 5%. It voted for him by, I believe, 7% in 2020, and it voted for him by around 7% in 2020, and Hillary Clinton by about 4% in 2016. And I think it does really like Joe Biden, and he did quite well in it in 2020. However, this is just a more to the right year than 2020, and I think it will vote for him by considerably less. I still think he will win it by a pretty secure margin. I do not think it is in play for Republicans. I just think it will be slightly less than 5%, maybe 4%. And here are the states that I think are truly in play for either party. That is 93 electoral votes. And now I'm going to fill in Donald Trump's lean states. The first one is North Carolina. North Carolina has not voted for a Democrat since 2008. However, it seems like it's always on the cusp of voting for a Democrat. You know, it was expected to vote for Hillary Clinton. It was expected to vote for Joe Biden. However, it never actually does. It relies a lot on minority turnout and black turnout especially, which is something that Joe Biden just isn't very good at. He's good at driving out the white suburbanite vote. However, he just does not do well in turning out people of color. In fact, it's expected that Donald Trump will gain with people of color, which will certainly hurt him in states like Georgia and North Carolina. I think Donald Trump will win it by around 3%, which is a 2% gain from 2020. Joe Biden seems to be making an effort in the state. However, I just do not think it is worth it. I think he should focus on more important states like Pennsylvania, like Michigan, Wisconsin, like Arizona. The next lean state that I have for Donald Trump is Georgia. This state actually did vote for Joe Biden in 2020. However, it was only by a couple thousand votes. It voted blue in the Senate elections in 2022. However, much like North Carolina, it relies a lot on the African American vote. And Joe Biden, like I said, simply just is not good at turning that out. Democrats can maybe make up for it in the suburbs. However, I just don't think they can. So even though it is shifting to the left by quite a large amount, I think it will vote more to the right than in 2020, simply just because Donald Trump is doing better this year than in 2020. My next lean state that I have for Donald Trump is the state of Nevada. This state voted for Hillary Clinton by 2.4% in 2016, and it voted for Joe Biden by the exact same margin in 2020. You might say, that doesn't sound like it's shifting to the right, until you look at the national environment. The entire nation moved to the left by around 2% in 2020. However, Nevada stayed the same, which means that it shifted 2% to the right. And I think with this national environment and Donald Trump doing better this year than he did in 2020, I think he can increase that margin to way more than 1%. I think 1%, maybe 1.5% is certainly possible. And now for Donald Trump's final lean state, I have the state of Wisconsin. This state voted for Joe Biden barely by a couple thousand votes in 2020, and I think it is shifting to the right. However, this is not determined largely by shifts. It is more determined just by the national environment and Donald Trump doing better this year than in 2020. And that is it for Donald Trump's lean states. He has 267 electoral votes compared to Joe Biden's 226, with 45 electoral votes still being up for grabs. He only needs 3 more electoral votes to win the presidency. And now we're moving on to the tilt states. And I'm going to start off with Donald Trump. And he is going to cross that 270 electoral vote threshold with the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of Joe Biden's 2 home states. He is from Scranton. He managed to win it by a bit more than 1% in 2020. However, I think this national environment will make it so that Donald Trump wins the state. I do not think it is going to be by 7 or by 5, like how a lot of pollsters and predictors say it will be. No, I think it will be extremely close. However, I still think Donald Trump will win the state, and that is extremely impactful. That is 19 electoral votes. In order for Joe Biden to win the presidency, he needs Pennsylvania, or else he's going to have to go to a Georgia or a North Carolina. And now, for Donald Trump's next tilt state, I have the state of Michigan. Michigan is a very odd case. It is much like North Carolina, except it is the opposite, where it is a swing state. However, it largely votes Democratic unless there is at least a red splash. It is hard to make it vote red. Joe Biden won it by around 2.9% in 2020, and I think Donald Trump will barely win it in 2024. This is certainly subject to change. However, I do think he carries the state by a couple thousand votes. I do not think the Israel-Hamas war has much to do with this, as a lot of the Arabs that are protesting that war, after seeing Donald Trump's policies on it, will probably still vote for Joe Biden, and we're only voting uncommitted just as protest, or at the very most, we'll just stay home. This is more just because of the national environment, and I do not think, as of now, Joe Biden would win this state. And then there was one, Arizona. I also think Donald Trump will win Arizona. I think this will be by the closest margin. Much like Georgia, it is shifting extremely fast to the left. It voted for Mark Kelly by around 4.9% in 2022, and Joe Biden won it barely in 2020 by less than 1%. And while it is shifting to the left, I do think Donald Trump simply just doing better in this election than in 2020 will counteract that. Well, the state just naturally dislikes Donald Trump. It is a very moderate state. It is the state of John McCain, and it, frankly, does not want to vote for an election denier. That was made clear by them rejecting Kari Lake. However, all you have to do is look at the presidential debate. Donald Trump, although he was saying a bunch of lies, acted more presidential, acted more controlled, acted more clear, and was just a better speaker than Joe Biden. He was able to deliver his points properly. All you have to do is just look at the debate to see that. And I think voters are going to take note of this, especially because there's 2 more debates, and I do not think the Biden campaign will say no to those debates. Voters will take note of how Donald Trump sounds more presidential, and I think Arizona will vote for Donald Trump. So that is my final electoral map. 312 electoral votes for Donald Trump to 226 for Joe Biden. This is highly subject to change. The debates just happened like a week ago. Who knows? Voters maybe could forget about them. There could be a swing in the polls. Joe Biden could do way better in the second debates. Or something quite likely is he gets replaced by someone like Kamala Harris. We have many senators and representatives coming out and sharing their support for Joe Biden being removed. I do not think that will go away. The gears are turning, and I think he could seriously be replaced. Will that help the Democrats? We'll just have to see. But as of right now, I think this is how the map stands. Joe Biden could do better. He could win a lot of these swing states if he just, frankly, locks in. So that is it right now. 226 to 312. I do not think it will be a 347 state landslide for Donald Trump. I do not think New Jersey is in play or New Mexico is in play, or a state like New Hampshire or Maine will be under 5. I think this is how the map is right now. I think Joe Biden could seriously do better. I think Donald Trump could do a bit better. We'll just have to wait and see. This is one of the most crucial times for the campaigns. And I would probably advise the Democrats to replace Joe Biden, because this is an incumbent president going against an election denier, one of the most unpopular people in the country, and he is winning by Obama-like margins. That's crazy. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tomorrow I will be releasing my Senate prediction, and I will see you in the next one.